Sit down. Pull the chair closer. Lock the door behind you, because what I am about to walk you through is not a rap beef. It is not a diss cycle. It is not two grown men trading fireworks on Instagram Live. What detonated this week is the loudest, ugliest, most self-inflicted career implosion a 50-year-old billionaire-adjacent mogul has ever committed on a hot microphone. And I have the tape, the numbers, the pay stub math, the GQ transcript, and the coroner's report to prove that Rick Ross did not just lose the round. Rozay walked directly into a Curtis Jackson trap he built with his own two hands, loaded the algorithm's rifle, kissed the barrel, and then filmed the funeral for his own album while pretending it was a diss video. I ran the tape back 4 times. 4. And I am telling you right now, on my mama, on the record, on this microphone, Rick Ross opened his mouth this week, said the 6 words no strategist in hip-hop should ever say out loud, and turned 50 Cent into the #1 trending name in the culture while Set in Stone was choking to death on the Billboard chart. 6 words. I'm trying to go viral this week. That is what Rick Ross said. That is what Rick Ross recorded. That is what Rick Ross posted. And that is what 50 Cent screenshotted, laminated, framed, and hung above his desk at G-Unit Film and Television headquarters like a hunting trophy. But that is only the appetizer, because underneath the noise of Rozay's meltdown is a receipt so surgical, so ice-cold, so career-terminating that when 50 Cent finally spoke it into that GQ camera, every single power fan on this planet went dead silent in the group chat. Courtney Kemp. Ghost. The execution that never had to happen. Stay locked in with me, because before we wrap tonight, I am going to hand you a verdict question, and I want your answer in the comments. Did Courtney Kemp really sharpen the pen on Ghost out of jealousy? And did Rick Ross just accidentally gift wrap 50 Cent the biggest algorithmic bag of 2026? Let me stretch this out, because you cannot understand what happened this week unless you understand the pattern. And the pattern with Curtis Jackson has been the identical pattern for 23 straight calendar years. 50 Cent does not chase virality. 50 Cent engineers it. He literally co-wrote the manual on it with Robert Greene. The 50th Law. The entire playbook sits on the shelf at your neighborhood Barnes and Noble. And what you are watching this week is Rick Ross, a 50-year-old man with a Wingstop portfolio, a car museum, a music catalog, and a brand new record called Set in Stone, standing in front of a camera and announcing his content strategy out loud like he is calling the play in a huddle the opposing team can hear from across the field. You do not narrate the ambush. You run the ambush. The second Rick Ross said those 6 words, 50 Cent did not have to type a syllable. The recommendation engine did the manual labor for him. And then Rozay kept going. He did not stop at 50 Cent. He dragged Eminem into it. He dragged the memory of Tupac Shakur into it. He dragged the entire framework of loyalty between black men and black women into a race-baiting monologue that made zero rhetorical sense to anybody actually paying attention to the sentences he was constructing. He said Curtis Jackson is loyal to the white man instead of the black woman. He named Courtney Kemp. He named the G-Unit sneaker relaunch. He named the Power Universe. He named Good Morning America. Rick Ross swung at every branch on the tree and forgot the entire tree was planted by 50 Cent, watered by 50 Cent, and harvested every fall by 50 Cent. Every branch Rozay shook money into Curtis's pocket. Every accusation Rozay lodged became a fresh Google search term. Every insult Rozay recorded became another click for the man he was allegedly attacking. And the punchline, the part that turns this from a beef into a strategic massacre, is that Set in Stone is projected to move under 26,000 album equivalent units in its first week. 26,000. On a record with 20-plus features, with Drake rumors baked in, with Meek Mill fan service, with the entire Maybach music roster driving, with a Miami rollout Rozay has been teasing for 6 full months. 26,000 units. That is not a rollout. That is a receipt. That is a coroner's report. That is a chalk outline on the sidewalk of the streaming era. Hold on. Before somebody in the comments accuses me of piling on Rozay, let me put the audio back on the table. Rick Ross looks into a camera lens and tells the world he is trying to go viral this week. Then he accuses 50 Cent of blaming a black woman, Courtney Kemp, for kicking him off the power shows. He tells Curtis to be loyal to the black woman the way Curtis has been loyal to Eminem. He mocks the G-Unit sneaker relaunch. He mocks Curtis for planning a posthumous Tupac verse. He says, and I am paraphrasing gently, that Pac has been dead for 30 years and needs to be left in peace. And then, in the same breath, this self-declared biggest boss you have seen thus far turns around the internet for a Tony Yayo and Lloyd Banks reunion remix. Y'all, the biggest boss is doing Subway numbers this week. That is not a diss record. That is a diary entry with a beat under it. But here is where the game absolutely flips, and this is the part your favorite commentary channels have not fully connected yet. While Rick Ross was pouring gasoline on his own Wingstop, 50 Cent was quietly sitting down for a GQ cover interview and detonating the loudest bomb the power fandom has ever heard him drop. Curtis Jackson looked into that camera. He did not raise his voice. He did not perform. He simply confirmed on the record what every power fan on this planet has been whispering in the group chat since season 3 ended. Courtney Kemp wanted to kill Ghost. Not because the story arc demanded it. Not because the writer's room voted on it. Not because the character had run his course. According to 50 Cent, Courtney Kemp wanted Ghost dead because Ghost had become bigger than her show, and 50 Cent had become bigger than her writing room. And when a showrunner decides your face on the trailer is louder than her name in the credits, that is not screenwriting anymore. That is a workplace assassination executed with a laptop instead of a firearm. Let me stretch this out further, because the details 50 Cent laid down inside that GQ sit-down are the seeds that pry the entire Power universe wide open. Curtis says that as early as season 3, Courtney Kemp had already sharpened her pen on Omari Hardwick's character. She wanted Ghost eliminated in the season 3 arc where Kanan was originally slated to die. She wanted the centerpiece of the show carved off the board because inside her mind, the show belonged to her. The concept was hers. The writing was hers. And every ounce of press oxygen 50 Cent and Omari Hardwick were sucking up on Good Morning America runs was oxygen she felt was rightfully hers. Curtis pushed back. Hard. He says he was cutting checks of only $17,000 per episode while he was simultaneously executive producing, music supervising, cutting the theme song, running the promotion machine, and personally paying for cast dinners. He says he took a voluntary pay cut to keep Ghost breathing on screen. He says he was not even permitted on the Good Morning America couch until season 3, at which point he had already single-handedly turned Power into a cultural monster. And then, right when America had finally learned to love James St. Patrick, right when the algorithm was pumping Power episodes into every living room from Harlem to Houston to Compton, according to 50 Cent, Courtney Kemp picked up the pen and executed the man anyway. Hold on. Because I already hear the comments loading. Somebody is about to type that this is only Curtis's version. Courtney Kemp is a black woman in an industry that eats black women for breakfast. Fair. Absolutely fair. And I am not going to pretend two things cannot be true at the exact same time. So let me play you Courtney Kemp's version, in her own recorded words, in her own interviews. Courtney Kemp says she stepped away from the Power universe because COVID turned 3 simultaneous productions into what she called air traffic control duty. She said the job stopped being creative writing and became budget spreadsheets, set safety protocols, health department phone calls, and pressure on top of pressure on top of pressure. She said, and I want you to catch this clean, I just want to make stuff up. I am a writer. She took the high road. She did not clap back at Curtis. She did not name him in a single interview. She walked into a Netflix deal and kept it graceful, which, if we are being honest, is a masterclass. Because Curtis Jackson will always drag you into the mud, and Courtney Kemp is the rare industry veteran who refused the invitation. But here is where it gets darker. If Curtis Jackson is telling the truth, and if the receipts he dropped inside this GQ profile line up with what Omari Hardwick has been dropping in interview after interview for the last 5 years, then the entire Power universe as we know it, Ghost's death, Kanan's death, Tommy going to Chicago, Tasha crossing into Force, the way Raising Kanan wrapped its final season, the way the spin-offs never quite hit the same cultural weight, all of it, every single narrative fracture, was shaped by one Showrunner's ego colliding with one former rapper's stardom in a writer's room off 6th Avenue. That is not television history. That is Michael Jordan versus Jerry Krause. That is the Bulls' dynasty shattered because a general manager could not stand being the smallest name in the trophy photo. That is the analogy Curtis picked in the GQ profile, and once you hear it out loud, you cannot unhear it. Ghost did not die because the story required it. Ghost died because a pen turned petty. Stay locked in, because the next receipt is the one that rewrites this week's entire timeline. Rick Ross, in the exact same news cycle Curtis Jackson is dropping this GQ nuclear payload on the power writer's room, decides that his contribution to the discourse is to publicly defend Courtney Kemp. Rick Ross, a man who has never written a scripted television series. A man whose album is doing whispering numbers this quarter. A man who is not on Good Morning America, not on GQ's cover, not headlining a Netflix relaunch, not sitting on a 5-network production deal. Rozay decided the highest value use of his platform this week was to lecture Curtis Jackson about loyalty to Black women. Y'all, the optics on this are catastrophic, because whether Rozay meant to align himself with Courtney Kemp or not, he has now publicly aligned himself with a narrative Curtis Jackson is disputing with dates, dollar figures, pay cut receipts, and paper trail math. Rozay picked a side. And he picked it on the exact week the other side was releasing paperwork. Meanwhile, Curtis Jackson is not sweating. Not one bead. Curtis is on 5 television networks. Curtis has Fight Night in the pipeline. Curtis has the Coca-Cola distribution bag. Curtis pivoted from rapper to mogul to studio head to showrunner to distributor to executive producer, and every single one of those pivots printed a new revenue stream. This is a man who cast himself opposite Robert De Niro on the big screen. This is a man who ran Redbox like it was his personal ATM. This is a man whose G-Unit sneaker relaunch, the same sneaker Rick Ross tried to clown on camera, is going to move quiet units and cash quiet money while Set in Stone is trying to explain to Def Jam why its first week projections read like an unsigned mixtape. Rick Ross wanted to trend. Congratulations, Rozay. You trended. You just trended attached to a punchline. Let me be honest with y'all for a second. I am not a hater. I am a Power fan. I have been in the Power universe since the first Courtney Kemp writer's room drop. I watched every Raising Kanan finale on the same night it aired. I know exactly which scene Curtis is referencing when he talks about the moment Ghost and Kanan brawled and Kanan disappeared into the flames only to resurface in Washington with Jukebox. I know Lena Waithe's fingerprints on the Chicago storyline. So when Curtis Jackson walks into a GQ interview and calmly explains that Ghost was executed off-screen because a showrunner's ego outgrew the leading man's star power, I do not process that as gossip. I process that as grief. Because I loved those characters. We all did. Ghost did not have to die. Kanan did not have to die. Tommy did not have to run west. Tarek did not have to break every ceiling the writers built for him. The Power universe cracked because 2 egos could not share one writer's room, and now we are watching Rick Ross wave the shrapnel around like it is a talking point. Here is where the darkness deepens. Curtis Jackson, being Curtis Jackson, did not drop the Courtney Kemp confession in a vacuum. He weaponized it. He detonated it on schedule. He watched Rick Ross announce his intent to go viral, waited 72 hours, and then handed Rozay a version of the story in which Rozay is publicly defending the villain of the entire Power fandom. Do you understand what that means? Every Power viewer who watches the Rick Ross clip and then watches the GQ interview walks away thinking Rick Ross picked the wrong side of the biggest television franchise of the decade. That is not a diss. That is career-adjacent damage. That is search engine damage. That is recommendation engine damage. That is exactly the type of quiet, structural, permanent damage Curtis Jackson has been inflicting on his opponents since Ja Rule was still on the charts and Rick Ross walked into it holding a bullhorn and a set-in-stone tracklist. Hold up. I do not want to pretend Courtney Kemp is a cartoon villain. 2 things can absolutely be true. Yes, Curtis Jackson is credited as executive producer. Yes, executive producers carry structural weight. Yes, when a writer builds the vehicle and the star drives the vehicle and the crowd cheers for the driver instead of the mechanic, resentment is human. I have watched this dynamic destroy other creative partnerships. I have watched it fracture the Kevin McCall and Chris Brown collaboration. A writer builds the ship. The singer sails the ship. And the writer watches the audience throw flowers at the wheel. That is a real wound. But you do not treat that wound by taking the pen and murdering the sailor. You treat it by writing yourself into the next chapter and building your own ship. Which, to Courtney Kemp's credit, is exactly the ship she just launched over at Netflix. She left the traffic jam. She started making stuff up again. Good for her. But that grace does not erase the Power Universe casualty list. And it does not erase the fact that Curtis Jackson, at the exact moment his most iconic character was being marched to the writer's room guillotine, absorbed a pay cut and stayed in the fight because he still believed the show mattered more than his check. Whether you love Curtis Jackson or hate him, that is a receipt with a date, a dollar figure, and an ink trail. And Rick Ross decided to argue with that receipt using nothing but volume. Let me tell you what happens next, because I have seen this exact playbook run at least 4 times in the last decade. Curtis Jackson does not respond immediately. He lets Rick Ross keep talking. He lets the set in stone numbers keep bleeding out. He lets the projected 26,000 harden into the confirmed 26,000. He lets the Power fandom stew on the Courtney Kemp confession for 72 full hours. And then, right around the time Rick Ross attempts his next viral swing, Curtis Jackson posts one perfectly composed Instagram meme, one perfectly timed short video, and the internet does the demolition for him. That is not luck. That is not karma. That is machinery. Rick Ross is running his mouth. Curtis Jackson is running an operating system. Y'all know I do not leave you without a verdict, so here it is. Rick Ross this week did not diss 50 Cent. Rick Ross this week promoted 50 Cent for free. Rozay named the sneakers. Rozay named the shows. Rozay named Good Morning America. Rozay named the Power Universe. Rozay named Eminem. Rozay named Tupac. Rozay named Courtney Kemp on the exact news cycle Curtis Jackson had already scheduled to blow the roof off the Courtney Kemp story. And when this dust settles, Set in Stone is going to be a footnote at the bottom of the year-end review. The GQ interview is going to be the front page of the culture. And the Power fandom is going to be rewatching season 1 and asking each other whether Ghost really had to leave us the way Ghost left us. Here is my last question for you, because I am not closing this loop tonight. I am handing it to your comment section. If Ghost did not have to die, and if Courtney Kemp really did aim the pen at Omari Hardwick because his shine got too bright, and if Curtis Jackson really did take a voluntary pay cut to keep the man on screen, then who owes the Power fandom an apology? Is it the writer? Is it the network? Is it the actors who stayed silent? Or is it, honestly, Rick Ross, for reminding all of us this week that the biggest boss in this room right now is the man who has never once had to announce he was trying to go viral, because virality has been on his payroll since 2003? Tell me in the comments. Should Ghost walk back into the frame? Because we never saw a body in a casket. I said what I said. We never saw the body. Tommy is linking up with Tarek. Force is heading north to New York. Raising Canon just closed its final chapter. The universe is wide open. And if the man who runs the algorithm decides James St. Patrick puts on a suit and walks back on screen next season, I promise you Set in Stone's 26,000 units will not be in the same sentence as him. Before I let y'all go, one more receipt, because I would not be doing my job if I did not circle back to the racial framing Rick Ross tried to smuggle into this mess. Rozay said Curtis Jackson is loyal to the white man over the black woman. I want to sit inside that sentence for a second, because that is an enormous accusation to fling around during a week. Your own arithmetic is the story. 26,000 units is arithmetic. A GQ cover is arithmetic. A 5-network TV empire is arithmetic. You do not answer arithmetic with slogans. You answer arithmetic with better arithmetic. And Rozay this week did not bring a calculator to the fight. He brought a bullhorn. And the bullhorn was pointed directly at his own Nike Cortez. Meanwhile, Curtis Jackson kept it surgical, kept it strategic, kept it structural. Let Rick Ross write the obituary himself and offered to sign the funeral card in the morning. One more layer, because there is a piece of this puzzle nobody on YouTube has fully connected yet. Ask yourself the question. Why no? Why is Curtis Jackson dropping the Courtney Kemp confession inside a GQ profile in August of 2026 specifically? Why not last summer? Why not the summer before? Why did he sit on this receipt for 3 full calendar cycles of press opportunity and pick this precise moment to pull the trigger? I will tell you why. Because Power is landing on Netflix in November of 2026. That is not a rumor. That is a confirmed platform migration. And Curtis Jackson knows exactly what Netflix does to a legacy franchise the moment it hits their content library. Netflix took Suits and turned it into the #1 streamed program in America nearly a decade after the original finale. Netflix took Breaking Bad and dropped it into a whole new generation of viewers who never watched an AMC broadcast. Netflix is a resurrection machine. And Curtis Jackson is timing his controversy detonation to land inside the exact algorithmic window when hundreds of millions of subscribers are about to discover Ghost for the first time. This is not gossip. This is chess. This is a man who studied Robert Greene, co-authored a book with Robert Greene, and lives inside the 48 Laws of Power framework, dropping a controversy grenade 6 weeks before the biggest platform relaunch of his television career. Rick Ross walked into that grenade holding a lit match and a set-in-stone press release. Rozay did not just pick the wrong week. Rozay picked the wrong quarter. Rozay picked the wrong platform migration. Rozay picked a fight with a man who had already scheduled the news cycle 6 weeks in advance. And here is the other detail I need you to see. If you go back and study the Rick Ross clip frame by frame, you notice something almost tragic in the delivery. Rozay looks tired. Rozay looks like a man who has already seen the projected first-week numbers and knows the arithmetic is not going to save him. Rozay looks like a man who has watched Curtis Jackson print television money for a full decade and finally decided that if he cannot beat Curtis on the streaming charts, he can at least try to beat him in the algorithm for one weekend. Except the plan requires you to be smarter than the algorithm. And the algorithm in 2026 was fine-tuned by Curtis Jackson's own PR strategists. So the plan collapses the second Rick Ross whispers it out loud, which is exactly what Rick Ross did. He announced the plan out loud, and the second he did, every commentary channel on this platform, including your girl right here, was handed a topic tree with 2 branches. Branch 1, cover the Rick Ross meltdown. Branch 2, cover the Curtis Jackson Courtney Kemp reveal. And both branches route back to Curtis. Both. Every content creator monetizing this news cycle is monetizing off 50-cent search volume because you volunteered to be the co-star of his cinematic universe. That is not a diss. That is unpaid promotion. And here is the third layer. Set in Stone is not just underperforming in isolation. It is underperforming in the exact release window that Cardi B is dropping and Playboy Cardi is releasing residuals. The streaming pool is diluted. The attention economy is fragmented. So Rozay's 26,000 units are not 26,000 units in a vacuum. They are 26,000 against a room where the softest first-week competitor is still moving double his number. That is not a bad week. That is a positioning failure. And when a legacy artist has a positioning failure, the smart move is to disappear for a quarter and re-emerge with a cinematic campaign. The dumb move is to record a rant video attacking a man who owns 5 television shows, a G-Unit sneaker relaunch, a Coca-Cola bag, and a GQ cover in the same news cycle. Rick Ross picked the dumb move. And now the dumb move is the story. So here is where I land. This week was not a Curtis Jackson versus Rick Ross week. This week was a Curtis Jackson versus Rick Ross versus Courtney Kemp versus the Power fandom versus the Netflix migration versus the entire attention economy week. And Curtis Jackson walked out of it carrying every single trophy in the display case. Rick Ross walked out of it holding a 26,000-unit album and a rant that turned him into the punchline of his own release week. Courtney Kemp walked out of it having to explain to the Power fandom why Ghost is inside an unseen casket instead of on a Netflix billboard. And the Power fans walked out of it wondering whether the show they grieved could still be breathing if one writer and one producer had checked their egos at the door. That is the read. That is the record. That is the receipt. That is the recap. If the vibe hit, punch the like button. If you are brand new around here, tap subscribe so you do not miss the next receipt drop. And if you believe Courtney Kemp owes the Power fandom an on-camera explanation, drop the single word ghost in the comments, because I am counting them, and I am pulling that thread in the next deep dive. Foul. Petty. Loud. That is the temperature of the culture this week, and your girl will see you on the next one.